Evening, guys. James and Jacqueline with you. So Jacqueline is going to share this to her personal page once it comes up just on her phone, just so we can kind of educate and share the information with as many people as we possibly can.
Oh no.
What are you doing?
I just posted it in some random private group. But
Okay,
that's
great.
okay.
Bear with us a second, guys.
Um,
Should be that one there.
which one? You help me.
That one. I'll go back to original.
Okay.
There we go.
There you go.
Done?
I
Perfect.
think so.
Okay.
Who knows?
Cool. Evening, guys. Okay, so I posted earlier in the week about some mindful ways around eating, and it resonated with a tremendous amount of a lot of people. And Jacqueline's got a great deal of experience working with a lot of clients about this particular subject, so we thought we'd jump on with both of us to just share a little bit more information and hopefully plant some more seeds for people to be consciously aware of how they're actually fueling their bodies on a day-to-day basis. Now, there are a host of reasons why people are or have a mindless approach to eating. That could be a lack of structure, a lack of accountability, a lack of self-worth, boredom, no real direction, no clear goals. And as we often say, it refers back to childhood on a lot of occasions. So it might have been when you were at school, you were told, or at home for that matter, you can't leave the table until all of your food is gone at lunchtimes, you know, if you're at school or at dinner when you're home with your parents. Or it might have been that you can't have a dessert until you've finished. Or you could be, you know, a family and you had siblings and it was a case of that for you to get a dessert, or, you know, you were encouraged to eat quickly because you wanted to get seconds, whatever it might be. So there are a whole host of reasons.
Food was restricted.
Yep, food was restricted, absolutely. So what about when you were talking about someone about the weekend with regards to they bought their own property, but when they were a child?
Yeah, so a client of mine, when they were a child, their food was restricted quite a lot, to the point that cupboards were locked in the kitchen. So obviously that created a lot of anxiety around food. So when they were living at home, living on their own, they have abundance of food all the time because they can't bear to have that link to what it felt like to not be able to access food when they were growing up. So that has led to quite a lot of overeating and also emotional eating. Yeah. So yeah, a lot of things. For example, another client had told me that her mum was quite obsessed with counting calories and slimming and weighing, and because she was always around that kind of rubbed off on her, and she has grown up to be exactly the same and be very obsessive about her weight. So yeah, and there is stats to show that if you have grown up with parents who have been yo-yo dieters, then you are likely to become a yo-yo dieter too. So it does very much depend on your relationship with food. Will very much depend on what kind of things you've been surrounded by as you've grown up.
And that's, you know, was that the person that when she was 10 she was going to the slimming clubs with her mum?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
she was constantly seeing that. Yeah. So, you know, that's why we always say we've got to really be mindful about the way that we speak to ourselves, but especially how we do these certain things in front of our children and what is encouraged from that perspective. So, you know, that is another thing to really consider with regards to that. And as always, when we're working with clients, we can give you the best nutrition plan. We can give you the best exercises to do for fat loss, whatever it might be, whatever someone is trying to achieve. However, if you are just literally working on surface levels, they're not going to get those long-term results. So we have to ask some really uncomfortable questions to clients, but that enables us to really work with them at the deep level and answer questions that they don't really want to answer. But unless we dig deep and peel off all of these layers, you're never going to get to where that client wants to be long-term and to be able to sustain that moving forward. So I've shared this on a stat beforehand, that approximately 45% of the population in the UK are either overweight or obese. So the principles that we're going to share with these are simple and effective, but that's going to help at least 70% in the UK that follow those, you know, that 45 million people. And that is only ever growing and growing and growing. Okay, so let me elaborate onto the 9 principles that I shared on Friday, I think it was, and I'll get Jacqueline to kind of interact and bring in some really important points with that. So the first one is about eating meals without any device in front of you, and in an ideal world in the same location, so a dining table. You know, you've only got to think of like when you are at the cinema, for argument's sake. And unfortunately, you know, we aren't judging, but you just naturally people watching. They haven't been to cinema for 2 or 3 years or 2 years.
I don't think we'll be going anytime soon.
That's another subject. But in the essence of, you know, people will buy these tremendous popcorn, you know, elements of popcorn, the boxes, ridiculous sizes of Cokes, and things along those lines, and
Skittles.
pick and mix, and don't get me started on Skittles.
We know you love Skittles.
Yeah. But you know that those kind of principles. So, you know, that's what we just call simply kind of that they're not conscious of what they're eating because they're engrossed in the movie or the film, whatever it might be. So do you want to describe, you did an amazing video last year for our community members about the Cephalic response. Do you want to discuss that in a little bit more detail, where the principles behind that?
Why it's really important not to eat in front of the TV, which I would say, first of all, most of my clients come to me with digestive health issues. So whether that is IBS or, you know, or they haven't been diagnosed with IBS, but they say, I get bloating, I get cramping, I'm constipated constantly, or lots of different digestive health issues, or whether they've got a diagnosed condition such as Crohn's or something like that. So it's a subject that I'm talking about quite a lot, how to improve digestion. This particular thing, the Cephalic response, improves digestion by 40%. So just one simple thing that you can do can improve digestion by 40%. And this is why it's so important not to be mindful when you're eating, and not to be eating in front of the TV or eating on the go. So I'll give you some examples. So first of all, the Cephalic response. Most people believe that digestion starts in the gut or in the mouth. But I explained to them that it actually starts in the mind. So if you are thinking about food, you often salivate. And that salivation isn't just here in the salivary glands, it's actually stimulating the gastric secretions, the hydrochloric acid, which helps you to digest your food. And a lot of people are quite low in hydrochloric acid, and this is one of the reasons why they're so low in hydrochloric acid, and that can end up causing gastrointestinal reflux. So how many people are on omeprazole, and how many people, when they went to the doctors and said, I get reflux, the doctor said, should we talk about Cephalic response? If that, I'd like £1 for every doctor that said that. I don't think I'd get very rich very quickly. How to stimulate the Cephalic response. So an ideal scenario is you are preparing dinner and you call your children down before you're about to dish up, and you say to them, can you lay the table? Can you put condiments on the table? And what do you want, all the veg? Do you want some of the veg? And the idea of that is they can smell it. They then start to see it. They might start picking at it as well. And all of this starts to impact your digestion, because your senses are stimulating. So seeing it, smelling it, tasting it, feeling it, that's all starting to stimulate the digestive secretions. If you don't do that, which a lot of people don't do, so that's an ideal scenario. So think about how you might eat. And I see this daily, just, you know, people watching and seeing what most people do. So very common mistakes, people eat in front of the TV with their dinner on their lap, not the TV on the lap, that would be uncomfortable. So dinner's on the lap and they're watching, and they might be watching the news, which puts you into a fear place. Fear is part of the sympathetic nervous system, which is where you are stressed and where you are not able to digest, because you're almost you are in a fight or flight response, because your brain doesn't know if what you're watching on TV is real or not. So the news, I was going to say the news is real. Not really. But the news is what they would say is not fiction. Depends on your viewpoint. But, you know, if you could be watching a drama, a murder drama, and you're watching that while you're eating the telly, your brain doesn't know it's not real, and you'll start to feel fearful or stressed and tense, and that's going to stop you from producing gastric secretions, and it's going to stop your digestion. It's going to just sit there putrefying when you eat the food, because you haven't got the hydrochloric acid flowing in to break it down, digest it, absorb it, and get all the assimilation of the nutrients. So just not eating while you're watching TV, and making sure you're mindful of your food. So the other thing that I see people doing is scrolling through their phone while they're eating. So you could go to any kinds of cafe and you'll see somebody munching on a sandwich and just scrolling mindlessly through their phone. Well, obviously you are not thinking about the food, you're not thinking about the digestion, it's just eating on the go. Another one is you see people walking along the road and they're just, you know, shoveling in food without without actually thinking about it. It's driving along in the car. Now, car journeys can be... Am I taking all your lines?
Yes, we're coming up on these. This is where we don't plan things, just go on the hop.
About 20 minutes ago, James was like, will you do a live with me? So, yeah, here I am.
And we don't necessarily go into the scientific because people want it in layman's terms. They don't necessarily want to kind of know, everything that's going on. How can I achieve X? But it's something that is really, really pivotal in that.
The simple science of it is you have the parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest nervous system, and then you have the sympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system is your fight or flight, and most people are spending too much time in that, and they're not getting into the place where you can rest and digest. So you're eating in a place where you can't digest. Your digestion is actually not functioning because of how you're thinking and feeling. So really simple things, being more mindful, not having the TV on, not scrolling through your phone, preparing yourself to eat, allowing yourself to salivate, seeing the food, feeling the food, smelling the food before you've even tasted the food will increase your digestion by 40%.
And that's something really simple that we can all kind of apply from these strategies that we're going to share with you. And they are simple and effective, and as always, we're not going to get you or ask you to do all of them at the same time because it'd be overwhelming. It's literally about just nailing one at a time and then moving forward from there. So let's go on to number 2. Put your cutlery down between each mouthful. Now this again will aid in that digestion and will help you to kind of eat that a little bit slower rather than eating as quickly as possible. And all of these strategies, the reason this has come up once again, is because I'm working with a couple of clients quite closely at the moment. They're struggling with certain binge eating, that they're showing these kind of symptoms a lot of the time. So I wanted to test these. I've gone through these all the time, but it's always good to remind you of these simple and effective things that you can kind of implement, and they really work. I tried these for a good kind of couple of weeks before I kind of want to go through this, just to remind myself of it, because I could become very guilty of all of these principles, and I'll kind of go through that in a little bit more detail.
I don't put my knife and fork down between each mouthful, but that's because I'm slowly eating, so I don't feel like I need to. It's almost like you've trained yourself to do it.
Yes.
So it's a training tool, and once you've done it, and once you've got yourself into the habit of eating slower, chewing more, I'm stealing it again, sorry. I'll just shut up.
At least 20, number 3 is at least 20 to 30 chews per mouth. So try that. It might be a case of that at the moment you're wafting this down so quickly. Just becoming a little bit more conscious of what you're eating. Next time you're going to have a meal, whether that be breakfast, lunch or dinner tomorrow, try that. Really chew the food properly so you're digesting. Now this, painfully for me, just before you jump in, is that when I used to struggle with getting my food caught in my esophagus, I've shared this information beforehand, my food would get caught in my esophagus, so I had to go to hospital.
And when did that happen? When you was most stressed?
Absolutely, yeah. When I wasn't doing what I'm doing now.
So when you're in the sympathetic nervous system,
and they had to put an endoscopy.
Activating your cephalic response.
Absolutely, they had to put an endoscopy down my throat, which wasn't particularly pleasant. And that was about 10 years ago, the last incident that happened, to actually push the food down, because what it was, I was in that stressful position, wasn't enjoying what I was doing, and was wafting down food because I was so hungry, and that was my wake-up call. So everything happens for a reason. Obviously, I can share that information with you now.
What I was going to say is we live in, number 1, very stressful times, and number 2, very busy times. So our lives are very, very full, and we're always trying to rush from one task to another. And we have eating really low down on the fitting it in. Yeah. If I usually ask my clients, how do you sit down and eat a meal? Do you have a window to sit down and eat? And a lot of people say, I eat at my desk, I eat in the car, I eat watching TV. And they rush. They're just trying to get it in so they can get on with their task. You really, really need to make it a priority as part of your digestion, and just so that you can be healthier and enjoy your food. And kid yourself that you don't have any time, because you have time to watch things on Facebook, you have time to scroll through Facebook, you have time to watch things on Netflix. And I think a lot of these people who are not activating the cephalic response or taking time to eat their food properly and timely are going to end up constipated, and then they spend a longer time sitting on the toilet trying to push out a stool. Yeah. So choose where you want to spend your time. I'd rather do it with the digestion,
and then again, medication comes into plan, because they just think, in order for me to reduce my symptoms are feeling uncomfortable and constipated, I'm going to need to take a medication, and then that all starts another process.
They get prescribed Mouthful, or they go to the chemist and have things like Dulcolax as a laxative. You know, I've got clients who initially came to me and they'd never had a bowel movement without having to take a laxative first. Which is just insane, and it's just those better habits and helping to stimulate the gastric secretions, helping the production of hydrochloric acid, which there's supplements that can help that as well in the short term. Note I said short term because supplements should only ever be a crutch. And then their digestion starts to work better. It's very, very rare that it's actually a structural issue that's causing your constipation. It does happen, but it's really, really rare. And usually once you sort out diet and eating habits and mindfulness, then you can really improve that on your own accord.
Okay, number 4. So we kind of alluded to this a little bit, but set aside at least 20 minutes per meal. Now, we work with a lot of busy parents, so I appreciate that necessarily you haven't got that if you're rushing out the door. But again, it's about priorities and about sorting things out at certain times of the day and so on and so forth. So, you know, try and set that time aside. If you can't do it for every meal, at least try it with the evening meal. Or if it's not something you can do every day, like always, start with one day and then just build up from there. So just something along those lines will certainly help. Jacqueline's kind of always alluded onto it, but again, number 5, reduce the times that you eat on the move. Now, I used to be really guilty of this, a kind of a badge of honour. When I had my printing company, I was going to see clients, I'd be wafting down food as I'd be going on, rushing in traffic, not even thinking about the way that I'm eating. And I appreciate if you are a lorry driver or a sales executive, that's challenging, but I can't stress enough, just setting that 20 minutes aside to let that food digest, eat it calmly. And what you'll often find is when you're eating on the go, you're less conscious of it, so you end up eating more. So if you've stopped off at a local store to get something whilst you're driving, we've done it numerous times, you know, when we drove to Liverpool, we were eating, but I was eating really slowly, you know, so it's just about thinking about this consciously the whole time rather than trying to get loads of things and eat it as quickly as you can.
When you used to do that in your car and when you was a salesperson, that was when you was ending up in A&E having the thing down your throat.
Yeah.
So just goes to show, proof in the pudding.
Absolutely. Number 6, eating with family and friends. When you tend to eat and then you're socialising, one, you're enjoying yourself, you tend to have more laughter. And that's a good thing, obviously. A lot of people are struggling the last 18 months that they haven't laughed anywhere near as much as they should. We were out last evening, that Jacqueline kindly took me away for a weekend for my birthday. And we were discussing, cutlery was going down, you're eating just much more slowly and you're aiding the digestion levels.
There's a caveat with that one though. You can then eat a bit more.
Of course, yeah, absolutely.
You have to be a bit mindful of that.
Again, just creating that consciousness.
And you can drink a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. She was trying to get me drunk last night. Number 7, so drink less when eating. So what I mean by this, and this is a gross generalisation, so say a group of lads go out on a night out, go and have a curry, and they're not even chewing their food, they're glugging down beer, half a pint goes, and then they haven't even chewed the food, it's literally swallowed the food down with alcohol especially, but with water, whatever it might be, is not going to aid your digestion again. So, and again, when you're wafting that down, your stomach isn't going to feel full for a lot longer because there's no chewing processes, because you're literally just wafting that food down. So again, really try to reduce that as much as you possibly can. Number 8, a lot of people...
Sorry, just to say that the more you drink while you're eating, the more it dilutes the hydrochloric acid. So therefore you can then get indigestion and
even greater.
And constipation. So it's best to actually drink in between meals and rather than drinking so much at your meal.
Yeah, absolutely. So number 8, we can all be guilty of this, kind of once finished, instead of sitting quietly and letting the food digest and leaving it a good kind of 30 minutes, often people are guilty to go and get some chocolate or go and open the biscuit tin, and they're not particularly hungry, but they've just become as like a natural habit, or as soon as I've eaten, I get to treat myself to a dessert or whatever it might be.
And there's a shift in blood sugars once you've eaten as well.
Absolutely.
So that's why sometimes people have a sweet craving after eating.
So it's going to take time to let that digest.
But there's a way around that. I can touch on that in a minute.
Go on, do you want to touch on that while we're...
Okay, well, blood sugar balancing is a massive key. It's just making sure that you have the right combination of foods. So, for example, a lot of people start breakfast with toast or cereal, which is just a carbohydrate-full meal. There's no protein hardly unless you're having something on that toast. and there's no good fats unless you're having a little bit of butter, but it's a heavy carbohydrate meal.
And no nutrients or minerals.
Blood sugar balancing means that you're bringing in protein and fats with each meal. So every single meal, you can have a carbohydrate content, of course, but you must have protein and fats with that, because that helps to keep the blood sugars balanced and you don't get a blood sugar spike. Because if you're having that, toast and jam, your blood sugars will go soaring up, and as quick as they come up, they'll come back down again, and then you'll be hungry again. Whereas if you're eating a protein with that, so for example, egg on toast, and then you've got your protein and your fat on that egg, then you are going to have more of a stepping stone effect with blood sugars, and it will bring you back down a bit more slower.
Yeah.
So food combining for blood sugar balancing will mean that your blood sugars stay a lot more stable.
Okay, cool. Lastly, and we kind of alluded to this already, but stay present. Notice the textures, the smell, the taste, and that's obviously where we kind of really covered the
that's the Cephalic response.
And just lastly, just to really finish up, I know there's loads of you joining. I'm sure there's lots of questions. We'll answer them as soon as we possibly can. But food is there as fuel and to be enjoyed, not to be eaten. Like, how can we waft this down the quickest that we possibly can? And hopefully with these 9 simple principles that we've shared, please share this with families and friends, share this on your timeline, because we want to just really educate and encourage people just to be a lot more mindful around when it comes to their eating habits, because you can go down that slippery slope very, very quickly. If you're doing all of the 9 things that we said that you're not doing, you can see why people just waft their food down. They don't even give it a time to kind of touch the sides. You can see how easily that happens when you bring up these poor habits about people become overweight and obese and so on and so forth, and it's that slippery slope.
And if you're not doing any of these 9, don't worry. Choose one that you think you're going to be able to make a consistent healthy habit, and when you've nailed that, introduce another one. Personally, I think the Cephalic response is the key, because it's the start of digestion. So if you're starting off your digestion well, then that's you're setting a precedence.
Cool. We'll leave it there. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Any questions, then post them below and we'll get back to you as soon as you can. Take care, guys. Bye.